Old shows still mean big downloads. The latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net. 48% of podcast downloads are of old shows, says research from First Story. The company points out that dynamic audio insertion for advertising makes all shows monetizable, even old ones, and will launch mass DAI tools this quarter. In July, Audioboom described a similar percentage of back catalogue show downloads. PodInbox has launched a monetisation feature, they've exclusively told us, to allow podcasters to get fan donations. As podcasters ask fans to leave audio messages on their page, they can now ask for donations too. Message tipping and recurring donations are on the way. WOC podcasters share that the Oprah Winfrey Network is accepting podcast pitches. 270 scientists and medical professionals have written to Spotify about Joe Rogan's podcast, asking for Spotify to moderate misinformation on its platform after a recent episode with Robert Malone. The letter suggests Spotify is enabling its hosted media to damage public trust in scientific research and sow doubt in the credibility of data-driven guidance offered by medical professionals. The Daily Beast goes one further, suggesting he's a platform for all sorts of unfiltered crazy. Chartable now offers a pixel-less onboarding option for smart ads. The new solution is server-to-server, and unlike the pixel-based version, can't be detected or disabled by ad blockers. And branded podcast agency Sweet Fish Media is to build new offices in Winter Garden in Florida, including 4 studios and a go-kart track. In People News, Maria Garcia is the new executive editor of Futuro Studios. She joins from WBUR in Boston. And Stephen Hine has launched his own podcast company, Story Mill Media. He was SVP of digital content at NBC Entertainment and worked for Nerdist Podcast Network and Fox. It's a Monday, so time for some tech stuff. Jason Snell posts some fancy Apple script that lets you hit one button on an external keyboard to add a note for better podcast editing. A method to inform podcast apps the instant a new episode is published. Podping saw 139,328 new episodes published over the last week. You can now use the Podping Watcher to see new episodes appear in real time. Now, Apple Podcasts or Spotify don't use Podping, and both platforms check our RSS feed every 5 minutes or so. Assuming they do that for each of Buzzsprout's 107,000 active podcasts, that's more than 18 million RSS feed requests a month. Podping would reduce that traffic to just 159,000, saving 99.2% of bandwidth, server time and electricity, while offering a better updated directory for listeners. The open list of podcast analytics prefixes has been updated with Podkite and Mediametry. The same repo also includes updated RSS user agents and podcast app user agents. And does anybody know what Podcast Player /1.1 is a user agent for? Imagine how easy that is to Google.
It's a very strange thing to me how one crew of guys could grow up in a neighborhood and all turn out to be serial killers.
From ID, Mafia Tapes dives into the history of the DeMeo crew and a trusted associate, Dominic Montillo. You'll hear from Montillo in his own words before his sudden and unexpected death during the making of the podcast. It launches today. In the latest episode of the Podcast Accelerator, co-founder Mark Asquith talks about podcast hosting company Captivate's acquisition by Global and the company's plans for 2022. I was an advisor for Captivate. And Exactly with Florence Given is launched today by Something Else. Artist, feminist and best-selling author, Florence and her guests will take big topics like relationships, social media, feminism and body image and examine them through a feminist lens. And that's the latest from our newsletter. For all the links, we're at podnews.net.